She was shamed for her old car, but when the dealership ran her credit, they went completely silent. The opulent showroom of Sterling Motors, usually a symphony of hushed sales pitches and the soft hum of high-end machinery, felt strangely charged that morning. The air itself seemed thick with an unspoken tension, though to the casual observer, only one person truly understood its source. Elara Vance sat hunched on a plush, cream-colored leather sofa, a figure easily dismissed as nothing more than a frail, elderly woman. Her threadbare coat, a relic from a forgotten decade, seemed to absorb every ray of the showroom's polished light rather than reflect its gleaming sheen. Beneath the hem of her faded skirt, a pair of worn, sensible shoes, scuffed at the toes, peeked out, suggesting countless miles walked and a life lived far from luxury. Her silver hair, once meticulously styled into an elegant coiffure, was now a wispy halo, stray strands escaping around a face etched with the undeniable lines of age and, beneath them, a profound, almost bone-deep weariness. Yet, hidden beneath the surface of apparent vulnerability, a sharp, calculating mind observed every detail. Sterling Finch, the sales manager, a man whose tailored suit seemed less an attire and more an extension of his own inflated ego, leaned against the gleaming chrome bumper of a sleek, obsidian-black luxury sedan. His smile, a predatory, condescending slash across his perfectly manicured face, was directed at Elara, but his words were clearly meant for the cluster of eager young sales associates who orbited him like planets around a sun. Just moments before, he had sharply rebuked a junior salesman for failing to close a deal on a mid-range sedan, his temper flaring, leaving the younger man visibly shaken. Sterling enjoyed these displays of power, the way they cemented his dominance in the showroom hierarchy. "Well, now," Sterling purred, his voice dripping with an almost theatrical politeness that barely masked his contempt. A faint scent of expensive cologne and desperation clung to him. "It seems we have a unique client today. One who, shall we say, appreciates the simpler things in life. Isn't that right, dear?" He winked at a young saleswoman, who giggled nervously, clearly understanding the intended mockery. The showroom, usually bustling, seemed to hold its breath, a collective pause as the sales team waited to see how Sterling would handle this unexpected, seemingly unprofitable, visitor. A subtle murmur of amusement rippled through them. Elara's gaze, though seemingly distant and clouded by age, sharpened imperceptibly. She knew precisely what he was doing. He was putting on a show, asserting his perceived superiority, reveling in the discomfort he believed he was inflicting upon her. The irony of his condescension was a bitter taste in her mouth, a familiar one she had encountered countless times from those who judged by appearance alone. Yet, she kept her expression impassive, a master of the mask she had meticulously crafted over decades of navigating a world obsessed with superficiality. "Indeed," Elara replied, her voice a thin, reedy whisper that forced Sterling to lean in slightly, straining to catch her words. "One appreciates the simple things when one has seen the true cost of the complicated ones." Her words were a subtle jab, a hint of depth Sterling was entirely too shallow to grasp. Sterling chuckled, a hollow, dismissive sound that bounced off the polished floors. "Ah, a philosopher, are we? Well, philosophy won't get you far in the world of high-end automobiles, my dear. Not unless you're prepared to pay the price. And from what I understand, your credit assessment is just about ready." He gestured grandly towards a glass-enclosed office where a nervous junior associate was hunched over a computer, frantically typing. "We'll see exactly what kind of simple things the market has in store for you." His tone was a sneer, confident in the impending validation of his assumptions. A murmur of agreement rippled through the sales team. They had spent the better part of an hour trying to shunt Elara towards the most basic, entry-level economy models, barely concealing their disdain when she continued to ask about mid-range sedans or even, laughably to them, a spacious SUV. Her old, rust-pitted compact car, a relic that looked as though it had barely survived the last 3 decades, stood forlornly in the parking lot, a testament in their eyes to her dire financial state. They had even placed a traffic cone near it, as if to mark it as an anomaly, something that didn't belong. Elara slowly rose from the sofa, her movements deliberate, almost frail, yet imbued with a quiet dignity. She adjusted the collar of her worn coat, her fingers brushing against the rough, familiar fabric. Her eyes, suddenly piercing and direct, fixed on Sterling Finch. The self-satisfied smile vanished from his face, replaced by a flicker of unease, a momentary crack in his arrogant facade. He sensed, perhaps instinctively, that something was amiss, but his ego refused to acknowledge the warning. "The credit assessment," Elara stated, her voice gaining a surprising clarity, a subtle undercurrent of steel, "will only tell you what is quantifiable. It will not tell you who I am, nor will it tell you why I am here. But it will, Mr. Finch, mark the end of your little game." A profound sense of anticipation welled within her. The moment was approaching. The junior associate, Chadwick, emerged from the office, a look of profound bewilderment, then outright horror, plastered across his face. He clutched a printout in his trembling hand, his eyes darting from the paper to Sterling, then to the seemingly harmless old woman. The showroom, usually abuzz with the low hum of sales pitches and the soft thrum of luxury vehicles, began to fall silent, one hushed whisper at a time. Even Sterling, for all his bluster, found his glib retort caught in his throat, his mouth opening and closing uselessly. "Mr. Finch," Chadwick stammered, his voice barely audible above the sudden, oppressive quiet, you need to see this." His voice cracked, betraying the sheer magnitude of his shock. Elara watched them, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. The curtain was about to fall. The performance was nearly over. And the truth, like a tidal wave, was about to wash away all their carefully constructed illusions. The silence that descended upon Sterling Motors was not just the absence of sound, it was the chilling realization that something monumental, something utterly unforeseen, was about to shatter their comfortable, self-serving world. The air grew heavy with unspoken dread. To truly understand the profound silence that had fallen upon Sterling Motors, one had to journey back through the intricate tapestry of Elara Vance's life, a life woven with threads of relentless ambition, unparalleled acumen, and an unwavering spirit forged in the crucible of hardship. Her 72 years had been a testament to the fact that true power resided not in brute force, but in intellect, foresight, and an unyielding will. She had begun life with nothing but these inherent gifts, born into a family of modest means in a forgotten corner of the country. As a child, she had sold handmade crafts door to door, learning the nuances of persuasion and the cold indifference of rejection long before she could grasp complex financial theories. Each closed door, each dismissive glance, had only fueled her determination to build something so vast, so undeniable, that no one could ever dismiss her again. From those humble beginnings, she had meticulously built an empire that spanned continents, encompassing vast real estate holdings from towering urban skyscrapers to sprawling agricultural lands, a portfolio of priceless art coveted by museums worldwide, and a network of investment firms that shaped global markets with a single, well-placed trade. Her name, Elara Vance, had become synonymous with success, a whispered legend in the highest echelons of finance and culture, a name few had ever seen in person, yet all recognized. Yet, with the accumulation of immense wealth came an insidious companion, profound loneliness. The higher she ascended, the thinner the air became, and the fewer genuine souls she encountered. People, she observed with increasing disillusionment, were drawn to her not for who she was, but for what she possessed. It was a cold, hard truth that had settled deep in her bones. Friends became sycophants, their laughter too loud, their compliments too effusive. Business partners became opportunists, their handshake firm but their intentions veiled by layers of self-interest. Even family members transformed into vultures, circling with thinly veiled avarice, their calls becoming more frequent, their concerns for her health always coinciding with a new financial request. She saw through their carefully constructed smiles, their feigned affection, their endless requests veiled as opportunities or necessities. Each interaction became a cynical exercise in deciphering true intent from calculated flattery, a game she had grown weary of playing. Her sprawling estates, once symbols of achievement, had become gilded cages, isolating her from the very humanity she yearned to connect with. The silence in her opulent rooms was not peaceful, it was deafening in its emptiness. One of the most prominent examples of this insidious shift was her grandnephew, Caspian Thorne. A slick, ambitious young man in his early 30s, Caspian had positioned himself as the benevolent head of the Vance Family Foundation, a charitable organization Alara had established years ago to funnel her immense wealth into meaningful causes. On the surface, he was charming, articulate, and seemingly devoted to the family legacy. He spoke with a practiced cadence, his eyes gleaming with an artificial sincerity. But Alara, with her keen eye for human nature, saw the true Caspian. His devotion was to her fortune, not to her well-being. He saw her not as a beloved aunt, but as an obstacle, a ticking clock standing between him and an unimaginable inheritance. He had already begun to make questionable investments through the foundation, subtly redirecting funds into companies where he held a vested, undisclosed interest, lining his own pockets while masquerading as a philanthropist. He would visit her sprawling, yet increasingly solitary, estate, always with a new, investment opportunity for the foundation that somehow always seemed to benefit a company he had a vested interest in, or a thinly veiled suggestion for her to simplify her life, which invariably meant liquidating assets that she cherished for their beauty or historical significance, rather than their immediate liquidity. His concern for her well-being often manifested as subtle nudges towards a more manageable lifestyle, hinting at a future where her assets would be more easily transferred. Just last week, during one of his perfunctory visits, as Alara showed him a newly acquired antique sculpture, he had even suggested, with a patronizing chuckle, that she consider getting a small, practical car to make things easier for her. He spoke of her waning reflexes and the unnecessary burden of her luxury fleet. It was a thinly veiled insult, a clear insinuation that she was too old, too frail, and too irrelevant to manage her own affairs, let alone her vast fleet of luxury vehicles. He likely envisioned her puttering around in a tiny, unassuming vehicle, a perfect symbol of her perceived decline into senility, a convenient step towards his eventual control of her estate. This suggestion, seemingly innocuous, had been the catalyst. It was the final straw in a lifetime of betrayals and disappointments. Alara had always prided herself on her ability to discern character, but in her later years, the sheer volume of disingenuous individuals had worn her down, leaving her with a profound sense of emptiness. She needed, to know if there was any genuine goodness left in the world, unblemished by the lure of her wealth. She wanted to test the very fabric of human decency, to strip away the veneer of civility and see what lay beneath. A quiet desperation had begun to settle within her soul. The idea for the test began to germinate. She would disappear, in a sense, from her gilded cage. She would shed the trappings of her wealth, adopt a persona of apparent poverty and vulnerability, and venture out into the world. If people treated her with kindness and respect when they believed she had nothing to offer, then perhaps her faith in humanity could be rekindled. If they treated her with disdain and contempt, then her decision regarding her legacy, a decision that weighed heavily on her soul, would be made clear. She had no heirs she trusted, no true confidants. Her vast fortune was a burden, a magnet for the worst of humanity. She yearned to find a worthy recipient, someone whose character shone brightest not in the spotlight of prosperity, but in the dim obscurity of anonymity. Someone who saw humanity, not opportunity. The planning was meticulous, a testament to the strategic mind that had built her empire. She acquired an old, nondescript compact car, a model so common and uninspiring that it would blend into any background, its rust and dent speaking volumes about its humble origins. She purchased clothes from thrift stores, choosing items that were clean but undeniably worn, faded, and out of fashion, a stark contrast to the custom-made designer where she usually donned. She practiced her gait, her posture, the slight tremor in her hands, the almost imperceptible stoop that would make her appear more fragile than she truly was. She even spent weeks studying her reflection, perfecting the art of appearing disoriented, a little lost, perhaps even slightly senile, her eyes clouded by an artificial haze. Her goal was not just to look poor, but to evoke a sense of pity or, more likely, dismissiveness. She instructed her most trusted, long-serving attorney, Mr. Elias Thorne, no relation to Caspian, to handle all her affairs in her absence and to be prepared for a very specific, carefully timed intervention. Mr. Thorne, a man of unwavering loyalty and discretion, understood the profound motivations behind her unusual request. She would not be gone for long, just long enough to conduct her experiment, to see the world not through the lens of Alara Vance, the billionaire, but through the eyes of Alara Vance, the seemingly insignificant old woman. She understood the risk, the potential for humiliation, for outright cruelty, but the overwhelming need for truth outweighed any personal discomfort. The day she drove her battered old car away from her sprawling estate, leaving behind the hushed reverence of her staff and the gleaming luxury vehicles, she felt a strange mix of apprehension and exhilaration. She was no longer a prisoner of her wealth, she was an observer, a judge, a silent sentinel in a world too often blinded by appearances. And her first stop, guided by Caspian's patronizing suggestion, was a luxury car dealership, the perfect arena to test the true mettle of those who thrived on superficiality. It was a pilgrimage of sorts, a quest for a glimmer of genuine human kindness. The approach to Sterling Motors in her decrepit compact car was a stark, almost jarring contrast to the usual procession of gleaming luxury vehicles that graced its entrance. The car, a faded blue relic with a persistent rattle in its exhaust and a noticeable pull to the left, coughed and sputtered its way into a parking spot far from the main entrance, nestled almost apologetically between two delivery vans. The smell of old oil and faint exhaust fumes filled the air around it. As Alara carefully extracted herself from the driver's seat, her movements deliberately slow and stiff, feigning a greater frailty than she truly possessed, a young valet, preening by the entrance, barely spared her a glance, clearly dismissing her as an unfortunate delivery or perhaps a lost elderly relative who had taken a wrong turn. His attention was solely focused on a gleaming black convertible pulling up behind him. She walked towards the shimmering glass facade, her worn coat looking even more out of place against the backdrop of polished chrome and pristine paintwork, a visible anachronism in this temple of modern luxury. The automatic doors slid open with a soft sigh, revealing an interior that reeked of new leather, ambition, and a subtle, clinical air conditioning scent. The showroom was a symphony of modern design, minimalist white walls, strategically placed spotlights illuminating the sensual curves of high-performance vehicles, and a low murmur of hushed conversations, punctuated by the occasional ring of a telephone or the clink of a coffee cup. A young, impeccably dressed salesman, his tie perfectly knotted, his smile fixed and practiced, approached her. His name tag read Chadwick. He appeared to be in his late 20s, brimming with the kind of superficial confidence that comes from selling expensive things. "Welcome to Sterling Motors," he chirped, his eyes sweeping over her with a barely concealed look of assessment and dismissal, lingering on her scuffed shoes. "Can I help you?" His tone suggested he already knew the answer, probably not, and she was likely wasting his valuable time. Alara offered a small, hesitant smile, allowing a touch of vulnerability to color her expression. "Yes, dear. I'm looking for a car. Something practical. My grandnephew, Caspian, suggested I look into something small." She made sure to mention Caspian's name, knowing it might confuse them later, a tiny seed of future chaos. Chadwick's polished smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. "Caspian, you say? Well, our compact models are quite popular." He gestured vaguely towards a distant corner where a few smaller, less expensive sedans were almost hidden from view, relegated to the periphery, out of sight of the main luxury displays. He clearly had no intention of wasting time on a potential client who arrived in such a state. His gaze had already begun to drift towards the door, searching for a more promising prospect. This was the first test, and Chadwick was failing spectacularly. Alara nodded meekly, her gaze still fixed on him. "Oh, that sounds lovely. But I was hoping to perhaps see something a little more spacious. Perhaps an SUV?" She watched his reaction closely, noting the subtle tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible roll of his eyes. Chadwick's professionally polite mask slipped further. He coughed, a dismissive sound, and shifted his weight uncomfortably. An SUV, madam? For your needs, a compact would be much more manageable. Less to worry about, you know. Fuel efficiency, parking. His voice trailed off, clearly implying her inability to handle anything larger or more expensive, her supposed lack of means. Why don't I introduce you to Mr. Finch? He's our sales manager, he can help you with financing options. The suggestion of financing was itself an insult, a clear assumption of her inability to pay outright. Elara allowed herself to be steered toward Sterling Finch's glass-enclosed office, feeling the collective gaze of the other salespeople, a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled amusement. She heard a quiet snicker from a young woman polishing a car nearby. Sterling, a man who believed his worth was directly proportional to the price tag of the cars he sold, took one look at Elara and her worn coat and quickly assessed her as a time-waster, a charity case who had wandered in by mistake. His expression hardened into a forced smile. Madam, Sterling began, his voice smooth but condescending, carrying a patronizing lilt. Chadwick tells me you're looking for a vehicle. And your grandnephew, Caspian, recommended a small car. A very sensible suggestion, if I may say so. We have some excellent, very affordable models for modest budgets. He gestured towards a glossy brochure for a base model sedan, its price clearly visible in bold print, as if the numbers themselves would deter any further aspiration. Yes, Caspian can be very practical, Elara agreed, her voice soft, a hint of a tremor. But I was hoping to see a bit more. What about that one? She pointed a gnarled finger towards a gleaming, top-of-the-line luxury SUV, its price tag pushing 6 figures, its metallic paint shimmering under the spotlights. She could feel Sterling's internal struggle, the conflict between professional politeness and outright dismissal. Sterling's carefully cultivated patience snapped, a barely audible crack. He forced a strained smile, his lips thinning. Madam, with all due respect, that vehicle is in a different league entirely. It requires a certain financial commitment. Perhaps we should focus on something that truly meets your current needs. Have you considered our pre-owned collection? We have some fantastic deals on older models that are still quite reliable. He pushed a second brochure across his desk, featuring faded pictures of used cars, clearly indicating her perceived station. Elara feigned a look of mild confusion, a furrow appearing on her brow. Oh, pre-owned? Is that what Caspian meant? He just said, small car. I do need something reliable, yes, but also comfortable. She let her voice waver slightly, a hint of vulnerability. My back isn't what it used to be, you see. Long drives are quite taxing. Sterling rolled his eyes almost imperceptibly, a gesture not meant for her, but impossible to hide. Of course, madam. Comfort is paramount. But comfort comes at a price. Perhaps we could discuss financing? We have excellent options for all credit levels, though some, naturally, are more favorable than others. He leaned back, a smug expression on his face, clearly expecting her to confess her financial limitations. He was relishing the power dynamic, the subtle humiliation he was inflicting. She could almost hear his internal monologue of self-congratulation. As Sterling continued his thinly veiled insults, his words echoing the very contempt she had anticipated, Elara's gaze drifted to the far corner of the showroom. There, an elderly woman with kind, weary eyes was meticulously wiping down the chrome rims of a sports car, her movements slow but precise. This was Beatrice, the cleaning lady. Unlike the sales staff, who barely acknowledged her presence, often stepping over her buckets or speaking around her as if she were invisible, Beatrice carried herself with a quiet dignity, her movements precise and unhurried. She wore a simple, faded uniform, a testament to her honest labor, and a faint, fresh scent of lemon polish seemed to follow her, a stark contrast to the aggressive new car smell. Elara felt a peculiar pull towards this woman, an instinctive recognition of a kindred spirit. A few minutes later, as Sterling was attempting to pressure Elara into signing a form for a low-end financing option without even showing her a car she might genuinely consider, Beatrice pushed her cleaning cart past their office, its wheels squeaking softly. Her eyes, tired but gentle, met Elara's, and a flicker of genuine empathy passed between them. Beatrice offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of shared understanding, perhaps recognizing the dismissive way Elara was being treated. It was a tiny act, but it felt like a warm ember in a cold room. Later, Elara excused herself, claiming she needed to use the restroom. She purposely took a roundabout path, her movements slow and deliberate, passing near Beatrice, who was now cleaning the immense glass partitions of a display case, a quiet figure in a world of noise. As Elara paused, feigning to admire a small, decorative figurine within the case, Beatrice quietly spoke, her voice low and gentle, almost a murmur, not looking up from her work. "Don't let them make you feel small, dear," Beatrice murmured, her words meant only for Elara. "They only see the shine on the outside. They don't see the heart within." She offered a small, knowing smile, a genuine warmth radiating from her tired eyes. "Would you like a glass of water? It's awfully warm in here sometimes, with all this glass and the lights." Elara's heart warmed in a way it hadn't in years. It was a simple offer, a small act of kindness, but it was delivered with a sincerity that was conspicuously absent from anyone else in the dealership. "That would be lovely, thank you," Elara replied, her voice soft, genuinely touched. Beatrice disappeared for a moment, her cart squeaking away, returning swiftly with a chilled bottle of water and a clean paper cup. She poured it for Elara with steady, careful hands, her movements reflecting a lifetime of quiet service. She offered a quiet observation as Elara took the cup. "They get like this, you know. All about the numbers. Forget about the people." Her eyes, though tired, held a deep well of compassion, a weariness born of witnessing too much superficiality. "My son, he's a mechanic, works in a small garage downtown. He always says, a car's a car, but a customer's a person. They could learn a thing or two from him." A faint, proud smile touched her lips. Elara took a slow sip of the water, savoring the simple gesture, the unexpected solace it brought. "He sounds like a good man," she said, genuinely moved by Beatrice's quiet wisdom and the uncalculating kindness. She saw the faint lines of worry around Beatrice's eyes, the slight tremor in her hands, signs of a life lived with effort and perhaps little reward. Yet, despite her own likely struggles, Beatrice extended kindness without a second thought, without any expectation of gain. This was the raw, uncalculated humanity Elara had been searching for, a pearl found amidst a sea of dross. A small flicker of hope ignited within her weary heart. Back in Sterling's office, the condescension continued, punctuated by increasingly impatient sighs. Sterling, growing visibly annoyed by Elara's perceived indecisiveness, finally pushed the credit application across the desk with a frustrated flourish. "Now, madam, if you could just fill this out. We need to run a full credit check to see what kind of financing you qualify for. It's standard procedure for a purchase of this magnitude, even for our more affordable models." He emphasized more affordable with a smirk, a clear attempt to remind her of her supposed limitations. Elara feigned a moment of hesitation, her brow furrowing slightly. "Oh, must I? All those numbers. I'm not very good with forms these days. My eyes aren't what they used to be." Sterling let out an exasperated sigh, a theatrical display of his dwindling patience. "It's a simple form, madam. Just your name, address, social security number. Nothing complicated." He gestured impatiently with his pen, tapping it against the paper. "We need to ensure you're a serious buyer, after all. We can't have people just wandering in, wasting our valuable time, can we?" His eyes darted to his watch, a gold timepiece that screamed its expense. Elara gave him a look that, had he been more astute, more perceptive than his own self-importance allowed, would have sent a chill down his spine. But Sterling was too self-absorbed, too confident in his own superiority, to notice the quiet power simmering beneath her calm exterior. "Very well," Elara said, her voice surprisingly firm, the tremor gone. "If it's truly necessary." She took the pen and meticulously filled out the form, her hands shaking slightly, not from frailty, but from the quiet anticipation of the impending revelation, a thrill running through her. She made sure every detail was precisely correct, every number legible, knowing that the smallest discrepancy could delay the inevitable, the unveiling of truth. She even added a small, almost imperceptible flourish to her signature, a subtle, personal mark of her true identity, a silent defiance. She handed the form back to Sterling, who snatched it impatiently, already looking past her, planning his next commission. "Excellent," Sterling declared, his eyes already scanning for his next potential client, dismissing Elara entirely. He handed the form to Chadwick, who stood nearby, still looking slightly bewildered by the earlier exchange. "Chadwick, run this through. And make sure it's expedited. I don't want to spend all afternoon on this. She's clearly not a serious buyer." As Chadwick hurried off to the glass office, the printout held loosely in his hand, Elara settled back into the chair, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. The stage was set. The characters had played their parts. The sales team, their faces a mixture of smug superiority and bored indifference, continued to ignore her, focusing instead on potential clients who arrived in far more impressive vehicles, their engines purring confidently. Only Beatrice, sweeping quietly in a far corner, occasionally cast a glance her way, a small, encouraging nod that went unnoticed by the others, a silent blessing. Elara knew, with absolute certainty, that her test was yielding precisely the results she had anticipated, for better and for worse. The truth, once hidden, was now ready to reveal itself with spectacular force. The silence that had begun to creep into the showroom tightened its grip, growing heavy and oppressive. The only sound was the faint whir of the copier from the glass-enclosed office, a mechanical heartbeat counting down to an inevitable climax. Chadwick, the junior associate, emerged from the office, his face a ghostly shade of white, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. He clutched the credit report in his trembling hand as if it were a venomous snake about to strike, its pages crinkling audibly. Sterling Finch, still leaning against the luxury SUV, was in the middle of a dismissive remark to one of his colleagues about that old biddy wasting everyone's time, when he saw Chadwick's face. His usual confident smirk faltered, replaced by a frown of annoyance. "What is it, Chadwick? Did she even qualify for a bicycle? Just spit it out, man, I've got real clients to attend to. Don't waste my time with minor inconveniences." He attempted a laugh, a forced, hollow sound, but it died in his throat as he met Chadwick's terrified gaze. Chadwick took a shaky breath, his gaze fixed on Elara, who sat serenely, almost regally, on the plush sofa, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Mr. Finch," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper, a mere rasp, you need to see this. Immediately." He thrust the printout into Sterling's hand, his fingers clammy and cold. Sterling snatched the paper, a scowl deepening on his face. "What is this nonsense? It's just a credit report. How bad could it be? Did she default on a loan in 1950? He scoffed, scanning the document, his eyes flicking over the numbers, then stopping abruptly at the bold, undeniable name, Elara Vance. Below it, a series of figures, assets, and credit lines that stretched into the dizzying stratospheres of unimaginable wealth, each number more astronomical than the last. He saw Vance Holdings International, Global Art Acquisitions Limited, and estimated net worth, multi-billion, followed by a number so large it blurred before his eyes. His brow furrowed in confusion, then disbelief, then a cold, creeping dread. A name he thought he recognized, but surely not that Elara Vance. The reclusive titan of industry who owned half the city's prime real estate, the one whose art collection alone was worth more than his entire dealership, his entire company. His eyes darted from the paper to the frail woman in the threadbare coat. It was impossible. This couldn't be her. The Elara Vance arrived in armored limousines, surrounded by a phalanx of security personnel. She didn't drive a rust-pitted compact car. She didn't ask about small cars with a wavering voice. A bead of sweat trickled down Sterling's temple, cold and clammy. He reread the report, the information searing itself into his brain, the numbers screaming at him, mocking his earlier condescension, his casual dismissals, his entire worldview. His face drained of color, going from a confident red to an ashen gray, a sickly pallor that spoke of profound shock. The entire sales team, drawn by the unusual silence and Sterling's sudden, unsettling pallor, had gathered, their whispered conversations dying out completely. They watched their manager, confused and apprehensive, then followed his terrified gaze to the old woman, a collective realization slowly dawning upon them, chilling them to the core. Elara, sensing the moment was ripe, the tension thick and palpable, slowly stood up. Her movements were no longer frail but imbued with a quiet power, a deliberate grace. She unbuttoned her worn coat, the rough fabric rustling softly, allowing it to fall open. Beneath it, she wasn't wearing an evening gown or a designer suit, but a surprisingly well-tailored, albeit conservative, dark silk dress. It was a subtle shift, yet enough to signify a profound transition, a shedding of disguise. Her hand went to her hair, and with a surprisingly elegant movement, she unpinned a discreet clip, allowing her silver hair to fall into soft, lustrous waves that framed her face, instantly softening and refining her appearance, revealing the dignified woman beneath the wisps. The stoop in her shoulders straightened, her posture becoming erect, regal, almost majestic. Her eyes, no longer clouded by feigned senility, now glittered with an undeniable intelligence and power, sharp and penetrating. "Mr. Finch," Elara's voice resonated through the silent showroom, no longer a reedy whisper but a clear, commanding tone that carried the weight of unquestionable authority, each word precisely enunciated. "It seems your credit assessment has yielded some rather unexpected results, wouldn't you agree?" Her voice was calm, almost dangerously so, a predator's quiet before the strike. Sterling could only gape, the credit report still clutched in his clammy hand, crumpling slightly with his uncontrolled trembling. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out, only a faint, guttural sound. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air, utterly exposed and vulnerable. Just then, the main doors to Sterling Motors swung open with a soft whoosh, and a tall, impeccably dressed man in a bespoke charcoal suit, carrying a slim leather briefcase, strode purposefully into the showroom. It was Mr. Elias Thorne, Elara's trusted attorney, his presence a stark contrast to the earlier casual, dismissive atmosphere. He surveyed the room, his gaze resting briefly on the stunned, pale sales team, a flicker of professional disapproval in his eyes, before settling on Elara. A flicker of approval, almost a private smile, passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of a mission accomplished. "Madam Vance," Mr. Thorne stated, his voice calm, authoritative, and resonating with absolute certainty, "I trust everything is proceeding as planned?" The sound of a Madam Vance echoed through the silent showroom like a thunderclap, shattering the remaining fragments of the sales team's composure. Gasps rippled through them. They knew that name. They had seen her picture in magazines, on the news, in financial journals. The reclusive billionaire, the titan of industry, the legendary philanthropist. The reality crashed down on them, hard and unforgiving. Their faces, moments ago smug and dismissive, contorted with a mixture of terror, humiliation, and desperate, agonizing realization. Sterling Finch finally found his voice, a strangled, desperate croak. "Madam Vance? But you, the car, the clothes." His words trailed off, incoherent, his mind struggling to reconcile the image of the frail old woman with the formidable figure now standing before him, radiating power. Elara fixed him with a stare that could freeze lava, her eyes burning with cold, incisive intelligence. "Yes, Mr. Finch. The car, the clothes, the persona. All part of an experiment. A rather illuminating one, I must say." Her voice was chillingly calm, devoid of any discernible emotion, making it all the more terrifying. "I came here today on the advice of my grandnephew, Caspian Thorne, who suggested I acquire a small, practical car. He, like you, seems to believe that my worth is somehow tied to the size of my vehicle or the perceived value of my attire. And like you, he has gravely miscalculated." The mention of Caspian Thorne's name sent a fresh wave of shock through the room. They had often heard Caspian Thorne's name mentioned in hushed tones by Sterling, often in reference to his important connections and his family's immense wealth. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with devastating clarity, revealing a meticulously planned, devastating picture. "Throughout my visit here today," Elara continued, her voice gaining a steely edge, each word a precise, damning indictment, "I have been treated with a level of disdain and disrespect that is frankly astounding. I was dismissed, ridiculed, and steered towards models that you deemed appropriate for someone of my apparent financial standing. Your sales team, Mr. Finch, seemed more interested in judging a book by its cover than in understanding a client's needs. You, yourself, showed a remarkable lack of professionalism and basic human decency, opting instead for thinly veiled insults and condescension." She paused, letting her words sink in, each one a hammer blow to their inflated egos, their carefully constructed world of superficiality. Her gaze swept over the stunned sales associates, each one shrinking under her penetrating stare, avoiding her eyes. "However," she said, her voice softening slightly, a subtle shift in tone, as she turned towards the cleaning lady, Beatrice, who stood frozen, mop in hand, her eyes wide with bewilderment and awe, tears starting to well up. "There was one individual who extended genuine kindness and respect, without knowing who I was, without any expectation of reward. One who offered a simple glass of water and a word of encouragement when others offered only contempt and dismissal." Beatrice, suddenly finding herself the center of attention, trembled slightly, tears streaming down her weathered face. She had no idea what was happening, only that the frail old woman was someone of immense power, someone who had seen her. "The masks, Mr. Finch, have fallen," Elara declared, her voice ringing with finality, echoing through the silent showroom. "And what they have revealed is deeply disappointing. The game, as I told you earlier, is indeed over. But the consequences, for some, are just beginning." Mr. Elias Thorne stepped forward, his expression grave, his presence radiating an undeniable legal authority. "Mr. Finch," he said, holding up a file, its contents clearly ominous, "I believe we have much to discuss regarding not only your business practices but also the immediate future of Sterling Motors. And as for Mr. Caspian Thorne, I assure you, his future with the Vance Family Foundation, and indeed any access to Madame Vance's assets, has just been dramatically altered. He will be receiving a formal notification of these changes shortly." The silence in the showroom was now absolute, broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible trembling of Sterling Finch's hands as the crumpled credit report slipped from his grasp and fluttered to the polished floor like a discarded dream, a symbol of his shattered reality. The aftermath of Elara Vance's dramatic revelation at Sterling Motors was swift, decisive, and utterly devastating for those who had so carelessly judged her. Within hours, the news spread like wildfire through the luxury automobile industry, carried on the whispers of stunned employees and the formal, unyielding statements issued by Mr. Elias Thorne's firm. Sterling Finch, the arrogant sales manager, found himself not only stripped of his position but also facing the immediate termination of his employment contract, effective that very moment. Elara, through Mr. Thorne, ensured that the details of his egregious behavior, his blatant discrimination against a seemingly vulnerable elderly woman, were discreetly but effectively circulated among the industry's most influential players, his name subtly but irrevocably tainted. His reputation, once built on a flimsy facade of slick sales and inflated ego, crumbled into dust. No other luxury dealership would touch him. His career was over, a casualty of his own monumental hubris. He was seen leaving the dealership later that day, a broken, defeated figure, carrying a single cardboard box of his meager personal effects, his tailored suit now looking like a cheap costume on a disgraced actor. The once eager sales associates, who had mirrored his contempt, found themselves on thin ice, facing internal investigations and a sudden, stark reality check about the true cost of their superficiality. Many were quickly let go, victims of a corporate house cleaning initiated by Alara's direct, unequivocal complaint to the dealership's ownership, a complaint that carried the weight of a multi-billion-dollar empire. The dealership itself faced a rigorous audit, its image tarnished, its profits plummeting as word of the incident spread among the elite clientele. The repercussions for Caspian Thorne, Alara's greedy grandnephew, were even more profound and far-reaching. He received a chilling, terse phone call from Mr. Elias Thorne, his calm voice carrying an undeniable finality. Caspian was informed that not only was he immediately removed from his position as the head of the Vance Family Foundation, but his access to any and all family assets, including the trust fund he had so eagerly anticipated, was irrevocably revoked. His name was to be struck from Alara Vance's will entirely, every mention of him expunged as if he had never existed. The vast inheritance he had so brazenly coveted, the future he had meticulously planned for himself, evaporated into thin air like a cruel mirage. Caspian, initially furious and disbelieving, his face red with indignation, rushed to Alara's sprawling estate, attempting to bluster his way in, to plead his case, to somehow salvage his ill-gotten gains and his shattered future. He found the ornate gates locked, his calls unanswered, and a stern, meticulously detailed letter from Mr. Thorne waiting for him, outlining the full extent of Alara's knowledge of his various misdeeds, his self-serving investments of foundation funds into companies he secretly controlled, his thinly veiled attempts to undermine Alara's authority, and his condescending remarks about her age and simpler needs. He was utterly exposed, his machinations laid bare for all to see, his carefully constructed facade of benevolence shattered. Caspian, stripped of his power, his future, and his carefully constructed image, found himself utterly alone, facing a bleak, uncertain future without the cushion of inherited wealth he had always taken for granted. He had believed his aunt to be a doddering old woman, easily manipulated, a relic to be dismissed, and now he paid the ultimate price for his arrogant misjudgment, a price far steeper than mere financial loss. The shame of his downfall would follow him, a constant, bitter companion. On the other side of this dramatic divide, Beatrice, the cleaning lady, experienced a shock of a profoundly different nature, a shock of overwhelming joy and disbelief. Still reeling from the revelation of Alara's true identity, her mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what she had witnessed, she was summoned by Mr. Elias Thorne the following day. She arrived at his opulent law offices, nervous and bewildered, her heart pounding, expecting perhaps a formal thank you or a small bonus for her kindness. Instead, she was ushered into a grand office and presented with documents that would forever change her life, documents that felt impossibly real in her trembling hands. "Beatrice," Mr. Thorne began, his voice warm and respectful, a stark contrast to the sterile formality she was accustomed to. "Madame Vance was deeply moved by your kindness yesterday. In a world full of superficiality, your genuine empathy shone brightly, a beacon of true humanity." He then proceeded to outline Alara's astonishing offer, speaking slowly, giving Beatrice time to absorb each incredible detail. Beatrice was to receive a fully paid-off, comfortable home in a quiet, pleasant neighborhood, a home that suited her needs perfectly, complete with a small garden she had always dreamed of, a patch of earth she could call her own. Furthermore, a substantial, life-changing sum of money was to be placed in an annuity in her name, providing her with a generous, secure income for the rest of her life, ensuring she would never have to worry about financial hardship again, about mounting medical bills, or about the simple comforts of old age. Alara also offered her a position as a senior advisor for the Vance Family Foundation, not in a demanding, public role, but as an integral part of its newly established Community Outreach and Empathy Program, a program specifically designed to identify and support individuals and small organizations that demonstrated genuine compassion and selflessness, those quiet heroes often overlooked by traditional philanthropy. It was a role that leveraged her innate kindness and wisdom, her ability to see the heart of people, without the physical demands of her previous arduous job. Beatrice, overwhelmed, could barely speak. Tears streamed down her face, tears of profound relief, of disbelieving gratitude, of burdens suddenly lifted. For years, she had quietly struggled, worrying about medical bills for her ailing back, about her aging body, about her uncertain future, about her son's dreams. Now, in a single, benevolent act, all those burdens had been lifted. She tried to express her thanks, but her voice was choked with emotion, only a faint whisper escaping her lips. "Madam Vance wishes you to know," Mr. Thorne said gently, his eyes conveying a deep understanding, "that true wealth is not measured in bank accounts, but in the richness of one's character. You, Beatrice, are truly wealthy." Beatrice could only nod, clutching the documents to her chest, her mind reeling, her heart swelling with a gratitude she could scarcely comprehend. She, the humble cleaning lady, had been seen, truly seen, by one of the most powerful women in the world. Her simple acts of kindness, performed without expectation or agenda, had reaped a reward beyond her wildest dreams, a testament to the quiet power of genuine human connection. The fallout was complete, a dramatic rebalancing of scales, where arrogance and greed were met with swift, unequivocal justice, and quiet compassion was elevated to its rightful, honored place. Months passed, and the dust settled on the dramatic events at Sterling Motors, fading into an industry legend whispered behind closed doors. Elara Vance, having found a renewed sense of purpose, gracefully stepped back from the public eye once more, but this time, her reclusiveness was born not of disillusionment, but of a quiet contentment, a profound peace she had rarely known before. She had found what she was searching for, a genuine heart, a beacon of true character amidst the glittering superficiality of her world. Her legacy, once a source of deep anxiety and a magnet for opportunists, was now being meticulously reshaped, redirected towards causes and individuals who embodied the values she cherished most: integrity, compassion, and selfless giving. The Vance Family Foundation, under new, ethical leadership, began to champion initiatives that truly uplifted communities, focusing on human dignity and genuine need rather than mere financial metrics or public relations optics. She occasionally met with Beatrice, finding solace in their quiet conversations, a rare, unburdened friendship blossoming between them. Caspian Thorne, once so smug and self-assured, vanished from the social scene, his name now whispered in hushed tones of failure and disgrace, a cautionary tale. The foundation he had so confidently managed, and the immense inheritance he had felt entitled to, were now firmly beyond his reach, guarded by Mr. Thorne's unyielding legal barriers. Stripped of his privileges, his lavish lifestyle, and his network of sycophantic acquaintances, he found himself adrift in a world that no longer catered to his every whim, forced to confront the harsh realities of a life devoid of unearned wealth. He struggled to find meaningful employment, his reputation preceding him, every door closing. He often found himself looking over his shoulder, a phantom sense of judgment following him, a constant reminder of the fortune he had lost through his own avarice and short-sighted cruelty. He was a prisoner of his own past, a bitter irony. Beatrice, however, blossomed. The new home was a haven, filled with light and warmth, the mortgage papers tucked safely away. She tended her small garden with meticulous care, the rich soil beneath her fingernails a constant reminder of the growth and new beginnings in her life. Her role at the Vance Family Foundation was not arduous but deeply fulfilling. She became a silent, but invaluable, voice in the selection process for new philanthropic endeavors, her innate ability to discern genuine need and character proving to be an unparalleled asset. She visited various community projects, not as a wealthy donor, but as a compassionate observer, her kind eyes and gentle demeanor bringing comfort and respect to those she met, her wisdom guiding the foundation's new path. Her son, the mechanic, received the support he needed to expand his small, honest garage, a true testament to his mother's unexpected good fortune, allowing him to hire more people and truly serve his community. Beatrice often thought of Alara, a woman who, despite her immense power, understood the profound value of a simple act of kindness, a connection that transcended wealth and status. Alara herself often reflected on the experiment, the profound journey she had undertaken. She found a quiet peace in knowing that her vast fortune would not fall into undeserving hands, that it would now serve a higher purpose. The test had been painful in its revelation of human cruelty and the pervasive nature of greed, but profoundly rewarding in its discovery of genuine goodness, of the enduring capacity for human empathy. She understood now, more deeply than ever, that true character is not paraded in designer clothes or driven in luxury cars. It is revealed in the quiet moments, in the small, uncalculated gestures made when no one important is watching, when there is no apparent gain to be had. It is in the genuine smile offered to someone perceived as having nothing, in the respect shown to those society often dismisses, in the spontaneous offer of a simple glass of water. Life has an uncanny way of reflecting what we project into the world. Those who radiate greed and contempt often find themselves adrift in a sea of their own making, isolated and unfulfilled, while those who extend kindness, even in the face of indifference, discover that goodness, like a quiet seed, will eventually sprout into an unexpected harvest, bearing fruits of connection, peace, and profound meaning. For in the grand tapestry of human existence, character is truly revealed not in the dazzling light of prosperity, but in the quiet, unassuming darkness of anonymity, and it is there that the truest rewards are often found, discovered by those with eyes to truly see. Thank you for watching Alara Vance's incredible story. What a powerful reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and true character shines brightest in unexpected places. If you were Alara, would you have given Caspian a second chance, or did he get what he deserved? And what about Beatrice? What was your favorite moment of her kindness? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We have many more inspiring and thought-provoking stories like this one that will challenge your perceptions and warm your heart. So, make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next upload. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to life.